I'm Becky McCoy, and you're listening to Stories of Unfolding Grace, the podcast about grace during unexpected times. You'll hear from real people dealing with hard stuff, and I hope you'll feel encouraged that you can bravely live through hard stuff too. On this episode of Stories of Unfolding Grace, I talk with Shauna Beth Paradiso. She's the creator and owner of Flippin' Bean Creation. And we're talking about her experience with infertility and miscarriage and fertility treatments and becoming a mom. Just as a note, this episode may not be appropriate for young audiences. I'm here with Shauna Beth Paradiso. And why don't you share a little bit with us about this extremely challenging season you experienced?
It was, a number of years ago now, but it was when my husband and I first started trying to start a family, and we realized that we were going to face years of infertility, and then starting on the journey of fertility treatments and being diagnosed as unexplained infertility was a really hard time for us because we had no...
And that just, literally means they have no idea why you can't get pregnant.
Exactly. They gave us less than a 5% chance of conceiving on our own, and they had no reason for it. They couldn't explain why it was happening, or why it wasn't happening, I guess would be more appropriate.
Right.
That was after 6 months worth of testing as well.
Yikes.
Yeah, so that was just the start, I'd say, of our difficult season.
Mm-hmm.
And after a few rounds of Clomid, we started with the most basic of fertility treatments. We went through 3 treatments, which is pretty standard, I think. We conceived on the 3rd round, and only to find out that my hormone levels were dropping enough so that they couldn't support a pregnancy. So inevitably, the doctor said we were going to lose the baby, but at the time I was still pregnant. So our first miscarriage, we actually carried through to 9 weeks, and the entire time knowing we were going to lose the baby because everything medical pointed to losing, still having hope that there'd be some kind of a miracle so that the child could live.
Yeah. So what happened after that?
Well, after our first miscarriage, I wanted to jump right back in and see what we could do next. I still wasn't too, let's say, turned off by the idea of fertility treatments, and I decided that we would take the next step to do gonadotropin injections, which is basically Clomid in a syringe. They told us that, like I said before, originally we had less than a 5% chance of conceiving. They said on Clomid that gave us a 10 to 15% chance of conceiving if we included an intrauterine insemination with each cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the gonadotropin injections, they said we'd have a 15 to 25% chance of conceiving. So the injections just consisted of a daily injection and then a trigger shot to force your body to ovulate. And then we'd have to go in the office for an intrauterine insemination for each of the cycles.
Mm-hmm. Which is like the turkey baster thing. That's what...
Exactly what
at the most basic, non-medical...
Yes.
Okay.
It is as far away from conceiving naturally as you could possibly get.
Right, yeah, no romance, no,
They come in with a big sheet of paper, and they read off the semen analysis from that morning.
Uh-huh.
I had to sit there and watch my husband either be embarrassed that his count was low or way too high. He'd stand up and cheer for himself, which was very entertaining.
And isn't that the most, sperm banks and those kinds of places have got to be the most mortifying place you've ever been, because you all know why you're all there. Horrible.
Of shame.
Yeah.
Walking down, you'd come out of this room that was equipped with leather couches and a TV, and they'd point at cabinets and tell you where magazines were, and then the nurse or medical assistant would just basically run away and slam the door
Right.
and pull the blinds. And so you leave that room with your little brown paper bag, and you got to go to the front and check out and hand them your brown paper bag.
Yeah.
I mean, it was every single cycle this had to happen. And never mind the original testing up front. So yes,
Right.
It was at some point in time, you just find your turtle shell and you just make it work. And you find humor in all the aspects that you can find humor in.
Right.
You can keep trucking, but I remember specifically one time, I don't remember which cycle, but it was the injectable cycle, that they walked in and they started reading off the list of the semen-analysis like they always did. And they said that his count was like 110 million. And he actually stood up from his chair and started bowing for...
I can totally see him doing that. That's awesome.
So proud of himself.
Yeah.
And about it for days. Like, it was just the topic of conversation. Because really, when you're in the middle of it all, again, you have to find the humor in it.
And celebrate what you can. Yeah.
So we're celebrating the small stuff, and he still talks about it to this day, that he had 110 million, and they, of course, read the averages off, and it was above average, so he thought he was just like a big stud muffin.
That's
and I was
awesome.
You just did that. Naked on a gurney at the time he does this, so
right.
Can't get any more embarrassing.
Yeah.
But so yeah, we did the three rounds of the injections. And on the third round, the insemination didn't really go as planned, and the doctor's office never confirmed anything went wrong, but after we took the summer off and went on a cruise and forgot about having kids for a few months, the doctor's office called us back and offered to do a fourth round for free. So we in our minds that something went wrong, like the sample wasn't put in correctly, and that they knew that, but they didn't say it because somehow they got a whole fourth cycle covered, and we did not have insurance. So we went in for a fourth cycle, and this was a year after we started all these treatments.
Wow.
August of 2010, and on that cycle, they always tell you to never take a pregnancy test because of all the hormones you're on. It could give you a false positive.
Right.
Every test I ever took, because I can't wait, they tell you to wait.
No, how could you? Like, holy cow, no.
I have friends who've been through the process, and they're like, well, the doctor said no. And I'm like, who cares what the doctor says? Like, put your mind at rest.
Right.
So I remember on day 12, because you're not supposed to go in for testing until day 16 after the insemination. On day 12, I took a test and it was positive.
Oh,
and,
wow.
So, of course, I told my husband. And then on day 16, we went in and we got more blood work drawn. So they, when they called with the blood work results, they said that all of my levels were in the average, but they were on the low end of average.
Okay.
Of course, immediately I'm having flashbacks of the past December when we lost. And, I started keeping a journal at that point. Well, actually, I started the journal after the first miscarriage because I realized that I was really internalizing a lot of what I was going through.
Oh, totally.
Because when you're a woman and you suffer miscarriage, you blame it on yourself 100%. Like, you can't carry a baby. The one thing that your body was designed to do, you can't do. And it really beats up your self-esteem as a woman, as a wife. And that was really the hardest part for me, was getting over the shame and the embarrassment I put on myself. I read somewhere that they said, if you don't talk about your miscarriage, it doesn't help healing. Even if you talk about it, though, you don't always feel better about it.
Yeah.
But I'm embarrassed by it that I decided it was better that I didn't talk about it to anybody.
Right. And you guys people didn't even know that you guys were doing treatment, right? Like,
nobody knew.
Yeah.
Nobody. And I wasn't working at the time, so it was easy to just sneak away and see the doctor. And my reaction with the first miscarriage was complete and utter anger. And just fury. if if I'm being really honest. And I remember just internalizing how angry and how offended I was by God that he would like give me something I longed for and wanted and then rip it away.
Right.
And quickly. And I felt like he was toying with my emotions, like, because I was so emotionally unstable and upset by it.
Right. You're already on so many hormones. Like,
not kidding. Yeah. And so I remember this. Finally, my husband came into our bedroom and I was sitting at the edge of our bed, just sobbing uncontrollably. And he stood at the end of the bed and he said, "What can I do?" And he just stood there and I just started beating him on the chest.
Aww.
And just, not fair. It's not fair.
Yeah.
And I think that was finally a point for me where I was like, I need to figure out how to deal with this emotionally. Yeah. It's not healthy for a marriage or for me to carry on without figuring out how to deal with it. Mm-hmm. So I started what I thought was going to be a prayer journal, but it actually ended up being originally a journal to my unborn child, what we were going through. And I felt like they could look back and say, wow, look at everything they went through to have me. That's crazy.
Right.
I don't know. They'll think more of me as a mother. Booster when they're in timeout or something. After the gonadotropin injection cycle worked, but they told me the hormones were too low again, or on the low range is what they said.
Right.
We ended up carrying within 6 weeks with that pregnancy. And I actually just found my journal this morning that I had been keeping over those 8 or 9 months. And my entry in the journal on the day I miscarried that baby said, looking back at this journal, I realized that the entire thing has really just been talking to myself instead of talking to God, instead of praying to God, instead of telling God what I wanted or what I desired or what I needed or asking him what his plan for me was.
Right.
It was kind of an epiphany for me to look back and be like, wow, like that was a huge realization to just come to terms with the fact that I was calling on the wrong person. I was calling on me. I was being too prideful and I wasn't listening when I do the most. And so that journal entry also included, this is now going to be my prayer journal. And this is going to be my journey in figuring out what God has planned for me instead of telling him, I need this, I want this. Can you do this? Don't do that. It also said that I didn't know how to handle another loss. So I didn't know whether I should just walk away from it. Like, take the desire from me if it's not going to happen because I don't want to hurt like this anymore. Mm-hmm. And it was starting to affect my marriage and my relationship because I was just so hard on myself about it. And I was just frankly trying to come to terms with the fact that we might not be able to have our own kids. Mm-hmm. And at that point, siblings started offering me surrogacy opportunities. And instead of helping me, it actually offended me because I didn't want to go that route. I was more frustrated that now people knew that I'd had another miscarriage and that they had assumed I couldn't have my own kids. So they were willing to help me. And the fact that they could have helped me even offended me more because nothing was wrong with them.
Right.
So that's where we were by that point.
So you had 2 miscarriages. You're not sure what's going to happen. What did you guys decide to do?
Take a break.
Yeah.
I said I need to get away from this for a while. But as a woman who wants a baby, that doesn't mean that you actually mentally take a break from it.
I can only imagine, for sure.
4 weeks, that little plus sign is appearing somehow. You still have pregnancy tests all over your house, and you're hoping. And so emotionally, it wasn't really a great break, but I tried to spend a lot of time in prayer and in listening, a lot of quiet, so that I could just figure out what direction to go. I looked for a job. I got a job. I started working full time. And I kind of put babies on the back burner thinking, everybody says when you go buy a boat, that's when you'll get pregnant. So I figured if I went and I got a job that I couldn't back out of for 6 months, I'd go and get pregnant, right?
Right.
So we took a break for the rest of that year as far as fertility treatments went. And then the following January, we signed up for an in vitro class.
Okay.
So one of the classes that they tell you they're going to stick a syringe in an orange and teach you how to do it and then send you on your way. There was no fruit at all at this class, by the way. So there wasn't even water. Well, for 2 hours. But, so we decided we'd move forward with in vitro, and our insurance again would cover 3 rounds of in vitro. So now we had between a 35 and 45% chance of conceiving with in vitro.
Okay.
Unexplained fertility. Most couples who go into an in vitro cycle are given a 50-50 chance. Some are given higher, a higher chance of conceiving, depending on what their issues were coming into the in vitro process. So they told us 35 to 45%. And again, the better odds, the better chances in our minds. So we moved forward with it towards the end of February. So this is February 2011 now. So this is we were like 18 months into the fertility processes. And the in vitro process requires that you start on injectable medications before you start a new cycle, the cycle that you're going to do the in vitro on. So 2 weeks before you start the actual in vitro cycle, you go on a drug called Lupron, which suppresses all of your hormones, makes you a little bit crazy, a little bit more crazy, let's say. And then you start the drug that increases the number of eggs your body is producing. And don't ask me the name of that. I can't remember off the top of my head. And you go on that drug for between 12 and 16 days. And then they go in and they do the egg retrieval, and they take out as many eggs as possible. And for that process, you're knocked completely unconscious.
Because that's like a mini surgery, right?
It's a mini surgery. They gave me Valium to calm me down because like very anxious about the process, including, and I could not stop talking after I took the Valium. Most people are kind of chill and a little more relaxed, which is what they hope for.
Right.
But I could not shut my mouth, and I think I was starting to annoy people because I was like a big chatterbox, and and they bring you into a room. You're in a little lobby like a doctor's office, and then they take you into the back and suddenly you're in a hospital, and they take you into a room in your little gown after they put the IV in, and they put you on a table, and they throw your ankles in stirrups and they tip the table almost completely upside down. So like you're on your head, and then they knock you out. And that's the last thing you remember going into the egg retrieval.
Wow.
Like, completely traumatizing.
Yeah.
Embarrassing. And I think that they do so many a day that sometimes they lose.
Did you feel like a science experiment?
Absolutely. And as the bed was tipping, I remember other people walking in the room that I hadn't met. So I knew that they were all supposed to be there. It was a teaching hospital, so some were students, and remember more people coming into the room as I'm being tipped upside down, and I'm thinking to myself, like, what am I doing? Like, I really
this is insane.
Yes, it was insane. And again, even farther from what starting a family should be.
Right.
It was not
my word.
Anyway. So they did the egg retrieval, and then they call you 3 days later with your results. How many eggs you got, how many got fertilized, and how many look viable. And anything that lives beyond 3 days, they can freeze or use for. And your transfer happens between 3 and 5 days after the egg retrieval, depending on how many you're putting in. I guess an embryo 5 days old has a higher success rate. So if they're putting in 2 embryos, for me, they put in 2 on day 3, since they didn't really want me to carry twins because I'm very small framed. So On 3 days after, they said we had 3 embryos. They were going to implant 2. So we went in again. No drugs this time. It's more of a process similar to the intrauterine insemination process.
Okay.
Except that they're going directly into the uterus. So I can't remember actually if I got knocked out for the second one, but I don't believe that I did. I did not. I did not get knocked out. Because when you're done, they make you lay there for 40 minutes on your back, elevated. So I do remember that. So they didn't give me any pass out drugs. And then they basically just say, okay, have a good day. We'll call you in 16 days or you'll get blood work in 16 days and we'll see what the results are.
Right.
It's a little awkward to just get up and leave the office knowing you are pregnant because there are 2 embryos inside you.
Right.
That they do the right thing.
Yeah.
So after 16 days later, I was in a Stop and Shop, and the doctor's office called with my blood work results, and I had taken a pregnancy test, and I knew it was going to come back positive. Mm-hmm. But what I could hear from the doctors was, where were my numbers at?
Yeah, so that you're not going through it again.
And so I'm in the middle of Stop and Shop. I'm in the cereal aisle, and my phone rings. And in front of me, walking up the aisle, is my sister, who has no idea we were going through any of these fertility treatments. Mm. So I'm trying to figure out a way to not offend her, but answer the phone call and have the conversation with the nurse about what the blood results were.
Right.
Pretended to not see her and turned my back and spoke to the nurse, and she called with a huge smile on her face. I could hear it, and said, your numbers look great. They are very high. Said they are very high. And she said, congratulations. I don't think I reacted the way she wanted me to because of all that was kind of distracting me at the moment. Uh-huh. So I was I'd put up a wall because I knew it was good news, but at the same time, I didn't want to get my hopes up and get hurt again. I was kind of defending myself. And so anyways, we were pregnant, and we were due for an ultrasound at 6 weeks pregnant. And at 6 weeks, they go in, they make sure the embryos are where they should be. And we went in for that ultrasound, and right away, there was one embryo. And you can see the heart beating in the ultrasound, but you can't hear it yet. Mm-hmm. And they see the embryo, and the heartbeat was 117. And so the doctor keeps looking because they know they put 2 embryos in, and they found the second embryo, and there was a heartbeat, and the heartbeat was 99. And then the doctor keeps looking, and that's when my husband was like, what are you looking for now?
Right.
Stop. He wanted to make sure that, an embryo hadn't split and we weren't having triplets. And
right.
I said to the doctor, are those heartbeats good? And his response was, well, we like to see them at this point at 120 at least. And I didn't have either embryo at 120. I had a 117 and a 99. And so I left the office, and everyone was congratulating me, and I just started sobbing.
Yeah.
In front of everybody, because I thought,
it's going to happen again.
So, long story short, we went back a week later for another ultrasound, and baby A with the 117 heartbeat had a much higher heartbeat this time, and baby B didn't have a heartbeat. And so we lost that twin. And looking back on it, I just feel like God knows how much you can handle before you ever do. Mm-hmm. And the plans that he has for you are more incredible and more rewarding than any plans you can come up with for yourself. And even though we've been through, sometimes we say 2.5 miscarriages because we carry our daughter to full term, and she's a healthy, loud 4-year-old Italian little girl.
She's awesome. Her daughter and Caleb are in the same preschool class, and they're just hilarious.
Sang an entire Natalie Grant album today. That was good. That was a lot of So yeah, sometimes we joke around and say we had 2.5 miscarriages, but I would not have changed a thing because it made my relationship with God something that it needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew the trials I would face as a parent, and he knew things about me that needed to change, and he sent me the children that would change me. So,
right. So you talked a little bit with the first miscarriage specifically, but I'm assuming the second one as well, that you were just really angry. And what did you struggle with most? You started to talk about it a little bit, but like, how did you handle, it was over 18 months of treatments.
So how did I handle like the stress of it all?
Yeah. Or not handle it.
I didn't know how to handle it. And thought I was handling it. I really thought I was coming to terms with it. I really thought I was emotionally stable. But, I watched my sister have a baby during that time, and it broke my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I resented her for the longest time for it. And I was really unhealthy emotionally and spiritually, but I didn't know it because I was just so angry.
Yeah.
And that put this wedge between everything I could have been and everything I was at the time.
Right. Choosing to live bravely and authentically is important to me, and I'm guessing it's something you are interested in too. You can learn more about my story at my blog, BeckyLMcCoy.com. Stop by and sign up to receive my monthly newsletter. It includes all sorts of interesting tidbits and family updates. Check the show notes for details. Hey, I'd love your help with something. If you're enjoying Stories of Unfolding Grace, please share it with your friends and subscribe in iTunes. If you leave a rating, it'll help other listeners to find the podcast. Thanks so much for being on this journey with me. In what ways did you see grace during that time? I'm using this definition of grace, that good things happen during difficult times. So how did you see grace?
I saw grace in watching my husband become the protector and becoming the backbone of our marriage. And no matter what we faced, he always made sure we were facing it together. So I felt alone in the struggle that I was a woman and I couldn't carry a child. But I never felt like I was going through it alone. I always knew that I had a friend to depend on who was. So I was really blessed in the fact that it strengthened my marriage. And my marriage did it. My marriage needed an obstacle to face so that we could become closer together.
Mm-hmm. How did you choose to live bravely and authentically as a result of all of this?
In all of this, 2 kids later and a third one about to pop. By starting to talk about it and not being afraid of it and not being embarrassed by it. I'm still very particular about who talks about it, if that makes sense. Like, it's very private to me as far as I wouldn't want people standing in a room saying, hey, did you hear? Did you hear this? Did you hear this? And did you know she tried this? So it's private to me in that fact, but I don't want people... If I can help a woman to know that it's not her fault, and if I could be there for a woman if she's feeling like she's less of a human being than she should be, I want to be brave in that, and I want to be bold in discussing it and making it a topic of conversation instead of ashamed of it.
Not a secret.
It could be a secret for some time. Everybody deals with loss differently.
Yep.
But ultimately not think differently of yourself because of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your story is so amazing. And like I don't throw the word miracle around, but I would use it in this situation. So 2 years after you get pregnant with your daughter, after years of struggling to get pregnant, What did you say? You woke up at like 2:00 in the morning one morning and take a pregnancy test and surprise.
Yeah, there was something in my heart that told me I just wanted a baby. And we had decided that fall we were going back for a second round of in vitro. And it was the middle of the night. It was a thunderstorm. And I said to my husband, "You left your car windows open." And he's like, "Oh my gosh." And he runs out, and something just told me to go take a test. And I giggled as I did it because I'm like, this is the silliest thing I've ever done.
Right.
And it came back positive instantly. And I kid you not, my exact reaction was, and then I took the pregnancy test stick and I put it on the table and I went back to bed and I got back in bed.
Right, because it's almost like too much. Like, you can't deal with this right now.
And then my husband comes back in bed and he's like, "They were closed." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's good. You don't have a flooded car." And I said, "You want to hear something funny?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "I think I'm pregnant." And he goes, and he rolled over and went to sleep. And we were like, didn't talk about it for the next day because we were just in complete shock that after 7 years of trying,
right,
and of fertility treatments, that just boom, there it is.
Which is amazing to know your son that was then born, who that's totally his personality. Like, he's just like, "I'm here, we're doing it, this is what's gonna happen."
He's a handful. He's good fun now.
Yeah, and now you're pregnant with a third baby, and that's just amazing to like think about all of the struggle and the heartbreak and just how horrible those years must have been. And now you have these 3 amazing, beautiful little children.
And you know what the greatest part about it is? There's a lot of tough stuff in parenting, and any mom or dad knows it. It is the hardest thing you're ever going to do.
Yep.
I just have this outlook with my kids and my family, like, they're not even supposed to be here. So it makes all of those challenges that much easier to deal with. And I can accept a tough day because I know I will never I never have to go back to where I was. And I'm so thankful for my children that I'm reminded every day of God's blessings to me because they make me smile and laugh and giggle and enjoy myself.
If you were to talk to someone who is dealing with infertility and miscarriage, what would you say to encourage them?
Don't be afraid to talk about it if you need to. I'd tell them to not blame themselves. It sounds silly because you really can't say something to someone in the situation because no matter what you say, they're going to resent you for it because they're hurting.
Yeah.
It's different in the way that it's continuous. The pain and the frustration is continuous until you have a child in your arms.
Yep.
Like, I look back when I had my first miscarriage or when I was going through it, and I just wanted to know that people were there if I needed them, but that they also weren't offended when I didn't call them.
Yeah.
Really, it's just being a true friend. So I would just tell them to find a listening ear if they need it, to know who their person is if they need a person, but to not be ashamed if they just want to be on their own.
And that's so true with, like, all grief, too. Yeah. That we need to know who our safe people are that we can feel free to call, but also know that they totally get it if you're like, "No, not today."
Right, and not offended by it.
Uh-huh.
You need people that understand your situation, and grief is similar in that way. People who have had losses kind of relate to one another.
Yeah.
Even though they're different kinds of losses, you kind of just have a bond.
Yep.
And the process.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm really, really glad that you decided to share your story. I know that there are so many people that feel like infertility is something that's shameful and that don't know other people who have dealt with it, and your story is really going to give them freedom and encouragement. Before we say goodbye, I have 4 questions I didn't tell you about.
Oh, love this.
Yeah. But they're not quite as difficult as the other ones. So the first one is, what are you loving right now? What's getting you really excited?
Looking forward to the family dynamic shift when this new baby comes.
Yeah.
Just watching, I've watched my son come into his own in the last 2 weeks, like really just change, and his personality is just more obvious when you walk into a room with him, and I'm just really interested to see the mothering skills that my daughter kind of innately comes out with, and
yeah,
I'm really looking forward to bringing home this little one and seeing what comes of it.
yeah, it is going to be fun. What is your favorite meal or snack, or what's your favorite food right now?
Oh gosh, I was obsessed with cheese sticks all day. Cheese sticks and M&Ms. Is that weird?
There you go. Rock on. You're pregnant. You can say whatever you want.
Cheese sticks and M&Ms, then. We're going with it.
Awesome. What are you doing to take care of yourself?
Trying to sit. Honestly, I'm always moving. I'm always doing something.
Yeah, if you guys haven't noticed, Shauna Beth is like an irrepressible person. So, yeah, sitting would be a challenge.
It's hard for me, but I'm really just trying to sit and enjoy watching my kids sing into an empty microphone or trains. I'm just trying to be in the moment and enjoy more time with them.
Yeah. And the last question is, what are you doing to be brave?
Oh, geez. Besides trying a VBAC?
No, that could be your answer. That's pretty darn brave. All the C-section mamas out there, including myself, understand that's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, it's a little terrifying.
Yeah.
But I'm really trying to be brave in sharing my story and standing up for my faith. And those are two things I'm working on this year.
Mm-hmm. Next week on Stories of Unfolding Grace is a super special episode. I'm actually not even going to give you a preview because it's a surprise guest. Although I'll give you one hint, it's somebody who's known me for a really long time. If you're interested in sharing your story of unfolding grace, head to my blog, beckylmccoy.com, and click on the submissions button. I can't wait to hear from you. Thanks again for joining me. I'm really looking forward to next week.